WMAZ show.
President Barack Obama talking at a surprise appearance, they say, in the White House briefing room. President Obama talking about Trayvon Martin and the George Zimmerman verdict. And it's Barack Obama, so you know what to expect.
Watching the debate over the course of the last week, I thought it might be useful for me to expand on my thoughts a little bit.
Yeah, because Barack Obama's thought process always makes things so much better.
First of all, I want to make sure that, once again, I send my thoughts and prayers as well as Michelle's to the family of Trayvon Martin, and to remark on the incredible grace and dignity with which they've dealt with the entire situation.
And I would like to acknowledge the amazing amount of grace that George Zimmerman and his parents and his family, his brother especially, very smart guy, very well-spoken, and I have some audio from him that I hope to be able to get to in the coming shows. But they have lost their home. They can't go home ever again, most likely. We heard this in the interview with Barbara Walters yesterday on the program. So I want to acknowledge, while Barack Obama is talking about the amazing amount of grace that Trayvon Martin's parents have exhibited, I would like to say the same of George Zimmerman and his family.
I can only imagine what they're going through, and it's remarkable how they've handled it.
It is also remarkable how nice the Zimmerman parents seem after everything they've been through.
The second thing I want to say is to reiterate what I said on Sunday, which is there are going to be a lot of arguments about the legal issues in the case. I'll let all the legal analysts and talking heads address those issues. The judge conducted the trial in a professional manner. The prosecution and the defense made their arguments. The juries were properly instructed that in a case such as this, reasonable doubt was relevant, and they rendered a verdict. And once the jury's spoken, that's how our system works.
I think Barack Obama right there may be preparing people for the fact that the Department of Justice is not going to pursue additional charges against George Zimmerman. I'm taking a guess here because there's been no announcement, but I believe that the Department of Justice is not going to file charges against George Zimmerman. I just read an article this morning by Pat Buchanan, sent to me from Chuck. Thank you very much. And I'll talk about that in a moment.
In a case such as this, reasonable doubt was relevant, and they rendered a verdict. And once the jury's spoken, that's how our system works.
You see, I don't know if he's already had a conversation with Eric Holder, but I'll tell you, if I'm right, and the Department of Justice is not going to file charges against George Zimmerman for some kind of civil rights violation, Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, the rest of them, all the people in the street are going to go bananas. I'm not predicting a riot, but they are going to be so ticked off.
But I did want to just talk a little bit about context and how people have responded to it and how people are feeling. When Trayvon Martin was first shot, I said that this could have been my son. Another way of saying that is Trayvon Martin could have been me 35 years ago.
Good God. Listen again.
When Trayvon Martin was first shot, I said that this could have been my son. Another way of saying that is Trayvon Martin could have been me 35 years ago.
So I posted this. That's amazing. I posted this on Facebook, and I got a comment from one of my friends. I just now heard that soundbite on the radio, and I couldn't believe it. He's basically admitting that 35 years ago, he was a gangsta thug wannabe who thought that crackers were creepy ass. It's true. That's what he's saying. This guy doesn't identify with the 15-year-old who went out and found the kidnapped 5-year-old girl. Obama identifies with the gangster, the burglar. It's unbelievable.
And when you think about why, in the African American community at least, there's a lot of pain around what happened here, I think it's important to recognize that the African American community is looking at this issue through a set of experiences and a history that doesn't go away. You know, there are very few African American men in this country who haven't had the experience of being followed when they were shopping in a department store. That includes me. There are very, very few African American men who haven't had the experience of walking across the street and hearing the locks click on the doors of cars. That happens to me, at least before I was a senator. There are very few African Americans who haven't had the experience of getting on an elevator and a woman clutching her purse nervously and holding her breath until she had a chance to get off.
All right, the Pat Buchanan article explains that as well, answers that as well. Why is it that when a black man is walking down the street, now you can have a black man in a suit and a tie, and maybe you don't have the same kind of reaction, but if you have a black man in a hoodie, why is it that people would make sure that the doors are locked in their car? Why is it that black people would say something like this? Judge Theodore A. McKee: if I'm walking down a street in Center City, Philadelphia at 2 a.m, and I hear some footsteps behind me and I turn around and there are a couple of young white dudes, I am probably not going to get very uptight. I'm probably not going to have the same reaction if I turn around and there is the proverbial black urban youth behind me. Now, if I am going to have this reaction, and I'm a black male who has studied martial arts for 20 some odd years, and I can defend myself, I can't help but think that the average white judge in the same situation will have a reaction that is 10 times more intense. Now, of course, everybody knows that Jesse Jackson himself acknowledged this same problem. He said, "There is nothing more painful for me at this stage in my life to walk down the street and hear footsteps and start to think about being robbed and then look around and see it's somebody white and feel relieved." That is amazing. So here's just a bit of what Pat Buchanan had to say in his article, and the link is in the show notes. I'm not going to read the whole thing. In the aftermath of the acquittal of George Zimmerman, Eric Holder, Al Sharpton, and Ben Jealous of the NAACP are calling on the black community to rise up in national protest. Yet they know, and Barack Obama, whose silence speaks volumes, and of course he was silent until today, knows that nothing is going to happen. Stand your ground laws in Florida and other states are not going to be repealed. George Zimmerman is not going to be prosecuted for a federal hate crime in the death of Trayvon Martin. The result of all of this ginned-up rage that has produced vandalism and violence is simply going to be an ever-deepening racial divide. Consider the matter of crime and fear of crime. From listening to cable channels and hearing Holder, Sharpton, Jealous, and others, one would think that the great threat to black children, and I would include Trayvon Martin's mother, who was saying, I think we heard, and I didn't make a big point of it yesterday, but we heard her talking about that now black children are afraid to walk home.
Is this the intent for the justice system to have for victims? I mean, it's sending a terrible message to other little black and brown boys that you can't walk fast, you can't walk slow. So what do? I mean, how do you get home without people knowing or either assuming that you're doing something wrong?
Okay, so now we know, after an article we read yesterday from the American Spectator, that Trayvon Martin was not heading home. He was going to his father's girlfriend's house. I have no idea. They are not talking about it. Nobody's asking them about it. We have no idea why Trayvon Martin was not staying with his mother or his father at home. He was 200 miles away, staying with his father's girlfriend. We also now know that there was a reason to suspect Trayvon Martin, even though George Zimmerman didn't know it at the time. Trayvon Martin has a record. The school district police covered it up, but he was a burglar. So this idea that his mother wants to present him as a completely innocent boy is simply not true. And I've got more to say about that as well, but I don't want to get too far away from what I'm talking about now, the Pat Buchanan article. So we're talking about the matter of crime and fear of crime. And Pat Buchanan writes, from listening to cable channels and the pundits on MSNBC and CNN and hearing Eric Holder, Al Sharpton, Ben Jealous, Trayvon's mother, and others, one would think that the greatest threat to black children today emanates from white vigilantes and white cops. Hence, every black father must have a conversation with his son, warning him not to resist or not to run if pulled over or hassled by a cop. Make the wrong move, son, and you may be dead, is the implication. And by the way, not resisting and not running is a good idea with cops in general, no matter what race you are. Buchanan asks, but is this the reality in black America? When Holder delivered his 2009 Nation of Cowards speech blaming racism for racial separation, the Manhattan Institute's Heather McDonald suggested that our Attorney General study his crime statistics. In New York, from January to June 2008, 83%, now I want you to stop what you're doing and hear these numbers. 83% of all gun assailants were black, according to witnesses and victims, although blacks were only 24% of the population. Blacks and Hispanics together accounted for 98% of all gun assailants. 49 of every 50 muggings and murders in the Big Apple were the work of black or Hispanic criminals. New York Police Commissioner Ray Kelly confirms McDonald's facts. Blacks and Hispanics commit 96% of all crimes in the city, he said. But only 85% of the stop and frisks are of blacks and Hispanics. And these may involve the kind of pat-downs all of us have had at the airport. So is stop and frisk the work of racist cops in New York, where the crime rate has been driven down to levels unseen in decades? According to Kelly, a majority of his police force, which he has been able to cut from 41,000 to 35,000 officers, is now made up of minorities. Blacks are also, here's the big point here, blacks are also, per capita, the principal victims of crime. Black on black crime. Would black fathers, this is Pat Buchanan, would black fathers prefer their sons to grow up in Chicago rather than low-crime New York City with its stop-and-frisk policy? Fernando Mateo, head of the New York Taxi Cab Union, urges his drivers to profile blacks and Hispanics for their own safety. Quote, the God's honest truth is that 99% of the people that are robbing, stealing, killing these drivers are blacks and Hispanics. There's more statistics, a lot more, in this article by Pat Buchanan. But this is the answer to the questions that Barack Obama was asking today.
There are very few African-American men in this country who haven't had the experience of being followed when they were shopping in a department store. That includes me. There are very, very few African-American men who haven't had the experience of walking across the street and hearing the locks click on the doors of cars. That happens to me, at least before I was a senator. There are very few African Americans who haven't had the experience of getting on an elevator and a woman clutching her purse nervously and holding her breath until she had a chance to get off.
Okay, and so now we know something that Barack Obama doesn't know. We know why. Thanks to Pat Buchanan, but actually we've known why for a very long time. One of the big questions that black liberals ask all the time is, why are there more black people in prison than white people? Because blacks commit more crime and are convicted of more crime, and so therefore more blacks are in prison. Duh.
The Jimmy Z Show.